Says, I'm a sprinter who was recently in a Cat 5 road race on a course with rolling hills. I was much slower than the peloton going up and much faster going down, so I was washing through the group. And I think that what he means by washing through the group is moving front to back, basically, as it was going through the hills.
No, back to front.
Or yeah, back to front, I should say. And kind of recycle.
Both ways, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, washing.
I had one teammate who got into a 3-man breakaway. So at that point, instead of staying to the side of the road at the front of the bottom of the next hill, I went to the left and climbed slow but out of the saddle, much to the frustration of everyone trying to go around me. I heard one person say he's blocking, but most of the others complained that I wasn't, and he says in quotes, holding my line. I think there are many memes about people being yelled at for holding their line or not holding their line on the internet. So, and I certainly did go into a lot of small holes when moving up the back, but that had me curious. What are the UCI rules with regards to blocking? How far can you go to dissuade the chase? Is there something wrong with me that I enjoyed doing this? So
there's a lot here.
Yeah, first things first, I'm going to try to paint like a visual picture for what happens, at least from what I can understand.
Can we address the elephant in the room first?
Yeah, sure. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Sorry, Bernie.
Yeah. Go ahead.
You know what I'm going to say, right?
I know what you're going to say, yeah.
Everyone
Yeah.
hears it. But Bernie, if you're a Cat 5 sprinter, there's like a whole meme around that.
Yeah, there is, for sure, yeah.
You probably just need to increase your FTP because there's probably no Cat 5 sprinters out
exactly.
I don't really think you get to choose your phenotype when you're a Cat 5. I think you're still trying to figure that out.
Oh, yeah. And
So don't pigeon. You can Google the meme.
Yeah, for sure.
What's the
one
Ralph
with
Wiggum?
with Ralph Wiggum. Yeah, exactly.
I think it's in we have a cycling meme
You can see it
post
on the forum.
which
It's
is if
fantastic.
you want to laugh, go do cycling memes on the forum. Just go through that for like an hour.
It's
It is
fantastic.
hilarious. But
Yeah.
General and Bernie, like Chad's point, don't pigeonhole yourself into that.
Yes.
But I think that you're going to be that way forever.
So it sounds like what happened is so he had a teammate go up the road. So like a good teammate, Bernie was like, hey, I need to help my teammate out who's up the road.
Mm-hmm.
So when this group, it's this washing machine motion, basically repetitive motion is what he's getting at with that, is happening every time they go over and like up a hill and down a hill. Where when they go up a hill, he moves back through the field. And then when they go down the hill, he's moving to the front of the field. And rinse and repeat. So when his teammate gets up the hill, he doesn't just kind of fall back out of the way and find his place back in the group, but he actually, it sounds like what he does is kind of cut across the front of the field as he's doing that and disrupts the movement of the field, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So kind of a movement across.
There's two. So one, if you are in it, if you're trying to like float through the peloton and like back and forth, like a wagging of an
like a
eel
snake
or something.
here.
Yeah,
Sure, that
is horrible. Don't ever
Yeah.
do that. That's downright dangerous.
Yeah. Yes.
So let's just get that and say that.
For sure.
Now, I think with the rest of this, let's just assume he's just somewhere in the peloton keeping a straight line and people are yelling at him for blocking.
Yeah, so if that's the case and you're just keeping your pace and you're falling back through the group, sorry, but nobody can really get upset at you. As long as if you're holding your line, they cannot get upset at you.
Yeah.
They will, but they shouldn't be.
Go as slow as you want to. It's called going backwards. We've all been there.
This is on.
No, a skill that we all have.
Well, I think we're going to go.
worked hard on that one these last couple seasons.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to work on. We're going to talk about all the ways to help your teammates, but
Yeah.
just this. It's on video. We do an air center crit, and it's probably 3 to 4 lanes wide of like
Very
cars.
wide.
And someone, I think you were off the front.
Yeah.
And I was on the front of it, of like the peloton chasing. I was doing like 200 watts, but I was shaking my head and like down low.
Selling the effort.
Big Darrell. And someone's yelling, someone goes by and like, quit blocking, like, or he's blocking us. I'm like, we could all line up and ride shoulder to shoulder in this group
go
and
20
be
wide
fine
on that road.
Yeah, we could go
Exactly.
20 wide and we'd be fine.
Yeah.
Like that is not blocking.
No, blocking is basically there's only one spot where you'd be able to move forward, and you are plugging that hole, so to speak.
Which is a great, you can totally do that too.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in
It's a
tech
viable
crits.
tactic. It's a great tactic.
I don't know. Where do you want to start, Jonathan?
I want to start with the UCI rules. So
Okay.
I went through the rule book with a search. I didn't read the whole thing. I don't wish that upon anybody. But going through that, there isn't a single rule against actual blocking. Nothing like that. There are rules against unsportsmanlike conduct. There are rules against unsafe riding.
Mm-hmm.
All of those, however, are left up in almost every case. They're left up to the commissaire to be able to decide whether that was justified or not. So that complaint has to be lodged or that has to be witnessed. And then
Commissaire and the riders you're riding against. I mean, this does not build the sort of reputation that's going to benefit you down the road.
Really good point.
Depends on what you're doing. Yeah, and so there's kind of like things that are considered like that's just tactics, and things considered no bueno.
He's a
Yeah.
reckless rider.
I just did a Masters race this year, person unnamed, but they were on the front. They didn't want to pull the front. And instead of just slowing down, they jammed on their brakes while I was on their wheel.
Can't do that.
I
Unsafe.
almost crashed. It's
Unsafe
I know
and
it's on video, and I was
dangerous.
like, "What are you
Can't do that.
doing?"
You
Like,
should lose your license for things like that.
do not jam on your brakes to try to like. And it was a sudden one. It wasn't just like I'm going to slow down.
This is not a contact sport.
They didn't want me on their wheel, so they.
Yeah. That's something that's entirely worth somebody getting upset about or calling them out on.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah, them's fighting words right there. Fighting actions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So let's get into his next question. Kind of how far can you go to dissuade the chase? Actually, his last question is: there's something wrong with me that I enjoyed this? If you enjoy peeving people off, getting them a little upset like that, I mean that's your bag. So
Yeah.
To each
that's
his own,
fine.
yeah.
But as far as how far can you go to dissuade the chase, let's talk about things that we would do to help a teammate. One thing, and actually we have a video coming out on this pretty soon. So Pete and I just recorded a couple race analysis videos yesterday where I was in an Omnium. And so a three race point series. So 3 races, 3 days in a row versus a TT. Next road race, final one was a crit. So the tactical one at the end was what decided it, and we had a points battle to shake out. So there's a lot of stuff that you'll see in that video that I think you'll really enjoy, where we go over that. And then we also did a separate video on the breakaway itself because that was super interesting. But I mean, first things first, if your rider is up the road in front of you, or if a teammate is up the road in front of you, last thing you want to do is chase him down. You don't want to do that. I think we all understand that. But
we all do not understand that.
that's actually a very good point.
I was just sorry. I was sometimes when I train, I watch our full race videos that we put out, and I was watching one of the Cat 4 races I did last year, and Bryce Lewis, who was our producer before, I didn't attack, and he chased me that whole time. And he's my employee.
Yeah.
I was like, "What are you doing, Bryce?"
There's a difference between understanding the theory and that it is good, and then actually putting it into
so many
practice.
times you see teammates chasing down teammates.
And being clear on what teammate means, because
Yeah.
it's pretty loosely defined in some cases, especially the lower categories.
Strange
because it's a
alliances.
club.
Yeah.
Well, it's a club, and you got 15 of you. Like, are we teammates? Or we just all want to win?
Heck
Yeah.
no. Yeah.
And strange alliances form too in the middle of a race, and also fall apart. So it's always kind
So
of
generally, don't chase down your teammate.
yes, generally. Now, if you do have a rider up the front, try to be toward the front of the group that is basically next in line behind the rider that's up the road. And the reason for that is you want to influence it, and you want to influence it negatively. But you can do that totally safely.
Yep.
So ways that you can do it, Nate, you already have your hands ready.
Yeah.
So you're ready to go.
Well, there's 2 things to do. So if you have your responsibility, you have a rider off the front, right? You can either, and you can do both these same times. One is if anyone bridges, you should be on their wheel. And if they are going to bridge up, you're not going to do any pulls. You're just going to stay on their wheel. What that does, 2 things.
Covered.
One is if they do get there all the way, then you have 2 teammates in the break.
Mm-hmm.
But 2, it also dissuades that person from bridging up
Yes.
because they look back, and even if it's just the 2 of you, they're like, "Oh, I
They
don't
know
want
what
to
they're
take."
doing. They're towing you across.
Yeah, I don't want to take Bill or Susan all the way up to the breakaway because then they're going to be fresh and they're going to have 2 people, and they sit up and like, You do that every single time, especially if you have 2 different teammates where you can. You can't be at the very front when you're doing this.
Right.
This is why I'm kind of mentioning these 2 different things.
Yep.
You got to be back a little bit because you have to see that slingshot. And if it's attack off the front, you can usually it's not enough speed differential. You can just go and hook on, especially because sorry, Jonathan.
Yeah.
It's so easy to pop. If you're a poppy person, that should be your job because you're not going to have to sustain the power for the bridge because you're going to be in the draft. Josh running locally is really good at this. He's poppy, but doesn't have the best sustained threshold power. I am not poppy, but I have to sustain threshold power. So when I go jump off, he can pop onto my wheel with a 5-second 1300 watt sprint. I can't get away from him, and then I can't drop him because he's in my draft.
He just holds in.
Yeah, and that is so annoying. So annoying, but it's great tactic. You're going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to your point of having multiple teammates to do this is so helpful. If it's just down to one rider, a lot of the time a pack can beat you up to the point where you're constantly trying to chase these things down, and then what happens is the matches just burn out, and then somebody does that one move and it's a bridge too far and you can't do it. But having those other teammates is so helpful. You know?
That's when it's like slower. That's kind of like if you see the pack slow down, like bridges are going to happen. So be in that position.
Yeah, cover, don't assist.
If there is a
good.
fast, if it's like a fast pack, or like you're in a bridging group, or even if you're in a breakaway and you don't want the breakaway to happen, because you don't like your chances, or there's like a great sprinter in there and you don't think it's going to happen. You can sit into the rotation, and then when it's your turn, just don't pull as hard as everybody else.
Yeah.
And there's a great way to do it, especially if people get confused, where you're like, you still rotate, but you're pulling like everyone else is doing 400 watts and you're doing like 250, and it slows it down. And then everyone else starts to not pull as hard.
You have to be pretty coy about it, though, or people will just immediately
Yes.
go around you. You have to find that sweet spot where you're going fast enough to make people think, oh, he's trying, he's working, versus this idiot just slowed down too much.
Yes, and we're going to blow around him or try to kick him out.
Or her.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll ditch that rider quickly.
I've heard that theory, but every time I've seen riders do that, it just messes it up. And so what you're
It's always disruptive.
To counter it, what you do is there's another jersey in this line. If you're the rider behind that jersey, when that person is turned to pull, just pull right past them, and everyone should do that. Like, we're pretending like this person's in the line.
You should assume that anyway. If you know that rider has a teammate up the road, you know that rider's not going to be of any use to you.
Well,
You
yes,
move around.
but I've never seen that happen in any race that I've done.
I've seen it happen.
Like
a ton.
I've never seen the group actually do it correctly. Okay, so maybe this is in 5, 4, 3, and 1, 2, 3 races.
Yeah.
They all just go. The person gets on front for like 15 seconds, and people raise their hand and go, "What? You're blocking me!" And like they start yelling, and then you're like, "Okay, let's get this going again." And it's so disruptive, but you can totally counter it.
I can think of many instances where I did this very thing last year.
Most of my racing
Yeah.
was NorCal Masters 1, 2, 3 racing, and I saw awesome demonstrations of what we're describing right now all the time. So much so that I could rely on it. If I had a rider up, I knew I didn't have to work. I could either sit on the back, or I could expect the pace line to move around me when it was my turn to pull.
So here's why that's so important. And we cover this actually in the video that we'll be releasing in the coming weeks. But a lot of the time we think that to be in a breakaway or anything else, we have to be substantially faster than the group that's ahead of us. But you don't. It's just a matter of 1 mile an hour more. And that 1 mile an hour more, you're going to catch them.
Yep.
So when you go to the front, and then if you put out 0 watts, you're going to get kicked out of the back of that thing. And you got a lot of enemies in that little group that you have when you get to the front. But if you put out 250 watts, you drop the speed, let's just say, from 26 to 24 for a short little bit of time.
It has to be subtle.
And it's a small thing, but what it does is it just makes that breakaway, it makes that bridging attempt 5 to 10 minutes longer. I don't know, insert whatever time. And that's all you need in order to help your teammate out. It's fine if
you're doing what's realistically possible to help your teammate.
If your bridging group that you don't want to be successful gets within 20 feet of your teammate at the end, that's still a success. Like, it doesn't mean that like you have to keep them out of sight. It's still a success if you get very close, but then your teammate still wins. So it's a subtle way, and I think that it's the death by 1,000 cuts sort of thing. It's a really important thing to learn, but it's hard to remember because in your mind you think I just have to be so much faster or I have to be a lot slower. There's nuance to it.
I had a different experience with you guys, but people being a lot slower messes it up. Mike's bikes at Bariani, which is a really long road race, so it's like 89 miles in the Cap 3 with some hills. People get tired. They had a rider up the road, very strong rider, and then we actually got neutralized. So like we had a very big gap, and me and this other guy are trying to pull it back. Start pulling, and then like I wave my elbow and look back. There's 5 Mike's Bikes jerseys lined up behind me.
Yep.
And they just, they're riding easy, under 200 watts. And no one else, everyone's tired. They don't want to like pull through 5 people and do it. And they're just so used to riding in the pack. And they're already tired. That Mike's just doing that disrupts the flow enough.
Yeah, and that's
we all throw up our hands.
Super dominant presence too.
It is
5 other riders back
Well, maybe
there.
it was 4, but it was
Still,
it was enough
even
that
3 would be enough to dissuade me.
It was rough. It was great tactics.
It wouldn't
Mike.
dissuade me. It would make me choose a different tactic. I'm not going to use
What do
this
you do?
pace line. I'm going. I'm going to try to get across on
They
my
cover.
own. It either works or it doesn't. And
Yeah.
maybe they do, and you tow a guy across, but you're across.
Yeah, it's what you can do.
They all covered me.
It's a great spot to be in, and not just
great spot for them.
And like you said, Nate, or like we were both talking, there's a lot of different ways to disrupt a chase or disrupt a group like that. You can either just sit on and just be back there and do what you do, or you can take the subtle approach and try to do it, or you can also do the thing like, for example, every time you come through a pace lines thrive on smooth and consistent power. And when you come through and you surge, or you even surge not at the front, but you surge at different points and just vary your speed, that's going to frustrate a lot of people. And if anybody's on the limit, that little surge that they have to deal with is going to put them over their limit, and it's really going to cost
a lot of ways to be disruptive.
So your teammates off the front too, and you have a small pack chasing, just not getting in the rotation. That can also frustrate people enough. Well, they will stop pulling because either they're frustrated or they're smart and say, hey, this person's going to be fresh.
Yes.
And I don't want to bring this teammate up. So that's another thing you can do.
Yep. One thing that I can think of too is the fake attacks, so to speak. Much like fishing, bike racers tend to be not so intelligent many times once they get on the bike, right? Like they can be a very intelligent person otherwise. Then once we get on, we get foggy brain.
Less and less so as you get tired. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's funny how in those moments, especially, so it's double-edged sword to be a marked rider. It's nice because you can influence the race with whatever you do, but it's also bad because you never get to sneak away. But if you're a marked rider or anything like that, you can just drag that field out with false attacks and make them surge and catch, and you can find out who would be the rider that would want to chase onto you.
But are you saying do that when someone's off the front?
Yeah. So actually, this was one of the races that we did this year. I think that we have a full race of it. You can check on our playlist that we have on YouTube, where I think Pete was up the front, or somebody was up the front. Maybe it was you that was up at the front. We were just chasing wheels for a bit, but then we started launching our own attacks. You were a ways up the road. We knew that you were
couldn't
safe.
Catch me.
We couldn't catch you. So then we were launching our own, and they were not attacks where we would ever extend it into a bridge, but they were hard attacks, and we'd keep it going for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and all the key players that were eager to get up to Nate would have to work really hard to latch on to Pete and I, and then we'd shut it down. And then they were also tired from doing that we would just kind of rinse and repeat.
I think that's like you were kind of like weakening the field.
Exactly.
But not
because you didn't want them to bridge up to you, right?
If I was within distance, I would say don't do any fake attacks. It's going to speed up the field.
Yeah. But we're talking about all possibilities
here.
here.
I'm just I'm adding context for everybody listening.
Yeah. One other, I guess, on the outside of the group side of things too, it's your line choice, even in a lot of spots. If it's a technical course,
or not even a technical course, sometimes just taking the long way around. So
people follow it.
Yeah, people totally do it at the air center. There's like the road's so wide that if you go wide the whole time around, you're adding like 5 seconds per lap.
Yeah, it's long.
So if you're in the front and you just start doing the long way around, everyone just starts following you because that's what you do as a cyclist, and you can add an extra 100 yards per lap.
It's a good idea on a wide course.
But don't take dangerous lines.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't break and tight pivots or something like that into a turn. Nothing like that.
Just don't, the fastest way is when you take like corner to corner and you take in a straight line, you can kind of go extra wide each time.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah. Or another thing that you can do, and this can definitely get dangerous, so it's riding a bit of a fine line here, but let's say the course has really rough asphalt and it's really bumpy in a spot, but it's not to the point where it's dangerous or anything else like that. If you want to dissuade people, just ride the bumpy line, and if they follow you, that's fine. But ride that bumpy line, and it's going to tire them out or make them upset, so then they'll end up doing more work, and it's
watch out for your tires, though.
Yes.
Can gutter them, or you can gutter yourself, and a lot of people aren't comfortable being in the gutter. So if they want your wheel, they're going to have to either take that chance or they're probably going to give up the wheel.
One thing I want to add to that too is if you have any sort of like on our weekly crit course that we have here, we have like they park semi-truck trailers on the course, and don't be the rider that tries to use an obstacle like that you would run into as some sort of like
if you're not looking up.
I've seen that like where we're echeloned against, and then like basically it's a decision where you lock up your brakes and or you hit. Don't do that. Don't do unsafe stuff.
Nothing unsportsmanlike.
You can echelon against a curb or like the course.
That's one thing.
But it's when things pop out that other riders aren't going to know about. Don't echelon like that like a car parked dirty on the course.
Don't push them into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's not safe.
Another thing that is really good to help your teammates, and Jonathan and I have done this before. If you have this works best in a technical course or on a finish, or even just starting a breakaway. But if it's strung out and you have some riders, if I am behind Jonathan, I just stop pulling. So like there's an acceleration, I just let a gap open, and then he goes away. I think we have videos. I've done that. We should do our own video of just that, Tucker.
Yeah, we should put it together.
I think I've done it 5 times where you or Pete gets in the breakaway for the win, because when it gets really fast, I just sit up for a second and then like people don't respond for 3 or 4 seconds, the gap is then huge.
You don't just sit up, you just let off the gas a bit.
Exactly. Yeah. I do my little thing like I'm going fast with my head, and everyone's like,
you don't.
Nate's a great draft.
Yeah.
Going from 400 to 300 watts to 200 watts, and suddenly
I just go to
there.
200, and you're going 700 watts.
You're the body that's breaking the wind, and you're the body that's in front of them.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't want to go around that.
Exactly. And they might even be able to see because I'm a big rider.
That too.
Yep.
Sure.
It just takes a few seconds, and then it happens.
Yes.
And then the only thing that's lame is it becomes a very boring race if no one wants to chase.
Yeah.
And just kind of sit together and
Then
be
it
like,
becomes
I got
a race for second or third or whatever.
Yeah.
It can still be boring if no one wants to do anything. It's like 45 minutes of easy pedaling.
That course has a high likelihood of becoming boring.
Yeah. So there are plenty of things you can do.
And we've talked a lot about assisting a teammate, but the hold your line comment always cracks me up. I mean, we've all obviously seen American Flyers, and the people just love to say that. Yeah. And along those lines, not exactly that though, is there's this too common assumption that the rider in front of you or whoever is in the wind or leading, even in a criterium, like a technical criterium, that rider in front is going to choose the best line every time. So very not the case. And the one that always comes to mind is Nevada City, because Nevada City bombs down a hill and then it takes 2 hard left-handers. And how you enter the first left-hander sets up the second left-hander. People cannot wrap their brains around that. They're always cutting the corner on the first one like it's the only turn, like it's a single 90-degree turn, and then you're just going to roll for a while, when in fact you have to set up for another even harder left turn. So how you set up for it is the widest outside line you can get, but nobody takes that line. So everybody ends up following the person who's taking the wrong line simply because they assume that rider knows what's up.
Yeah.
When you be that one guy who doesn't hold his line or her line, gets outside, takes that wide line, eventually other riders catch on to it or they don't. But in any case, that was a make or break strategy in the case of that race.
Yep.
But if you just blindly follow that rider in front of you, you're just hemorrhaging time and effort on that second turn, which sets up the next uphill.
The rest of it, yeah.
The next uphill, you can sail up half that uphill if you take those
Sets up your
2
lap,
turns right.
Really, because then that's the effort that you put out.
And I'm being very specific with that course, but the point is the rider in front of you doesn't necessarily have the best line in mind.
So if you take a different line than the rider in front of you, and letting the lower categories, they yell, "Hold your line!" When really it's just the person in front of you took a bad line, and you're taking a great line.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they yell.
Yeah.
So this is what I consider to be like one of my best strengths, and it's from skiing and from racing motocross. Those 2 things, where you'd think that motocross you just have a power, so you have a motor, so you can just power through whatever you do, and you can take the turn how you want. It's entirely about line choice, just like any racing endeavor is. And when you look at Formula One, MotoGP, cyclists should watch that, and they should look at what they do. You'd be surprised
different
on
circumstances
how
too.
many apexes, meaning the center point on the inside of the turn, these Formula One drivers intentionally miss, and they go wide around because they're painting the smoothest line around that entire track to be able to maintain momentum. And it takes a lot to be able to think outside the race, I would call it, and to think outside of what's going on in front of you. And the best motocross racers that you will see are always they have like a tie to be able to feel what the fastest line is and know what that fastest line is, and they don't care what somebody else is doing in front of them. They don't care what the berm looks like or the rut looks like in front of them. For cycling terms, they don't care where the pothole is. They don't care where the cone is. They don't care where any of that stuff is. They see outside those lines.
Yeah, and it reminds me, and I have no details on this, so I'm going to botch it. I'll paraphrase what I remember, but it was a youngster in a NASCAR type race who was the only rider amongst all of them who knew the rain line, would take the rain line. Everyone else was still sticking to the dry line, having to slow down, scrub off speed, or in and out of every turn, whereas this one youngster took the rain line throughout the course, or throughout the entirety of the course, and ended up winning the race.
Yeah.
What's a rain line?
Yeah, well, basically you're talking about a spot where there enough riders have driven so that it dries out and stays dry. Then the rest of the course is wet and sloppy. And you think, oh, no, I don't want to do that. But he's just thinking, I just want to be the fastest around this course that I can be. So he was. He doesn't adhere to just that single rule.
Just
where
thinking slightly outside
going.
of the box. I mean, you consider it from his perspective. You're coming into this, bunch of veterans, you're the newbie, and you have the defiance to say, that's not the best line, you guys. You go your own way, and he made it work.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's an extreme example of what I'm describing. But again, person in front of you may not have the best line.
You see it all the time in cross.
Yes.
Never in cross do they go, hold your line, Vanderpool.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing?
He's
You took a
changing it all
different
over.
line.
We admire it. When
Exactly,
we
we admire it.
Yeah.
I also think, do you guys, there's way, way, way more yelling the lower the category you're in.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
is
just
true.
watching the
It's like
videos
a chorus.
left side, left side.
It's amazing.
Slowing.
Yeah.
Like,
But why are they yelling these things
left
out?
turn. It'll be a
Crack.
crit. We'll do that I think 100 times. Left turn, left
It's like,
turn.
we got it, guys.
Yeah, we got it. Like,
we
I
don't need
understand
it.
safety and like it is great to call things out, but yeah,
When you're
there's
doing a
just
race.
a point where there is
Yes.
you've done it enough times, you're taking a left here.
Yeah. Last 2 points that I want to make on this is it's hold your line is usually you're not taking the line that I want. That's an important thing. So hear that when you hear that, so to speak. And then with Cat 5 racing, and for all of us, it behooves us to all take this perspective, but especially it's prevalent down in Cat 5 as many times if they're pointing the finger, that whole like finger pointing at you, one pointing at somebody else, 3 pointing back at you sort of a thing. If you point at somebody, you got 3 fingers pointing back at yourself almost every time, or you're doing the politician hand thing. If especially in Cat 5 racing, if you're finding fault with somebody's racing, chances are you're committing plenty faults yourself. You're all kind of learning through this whole thing. Now, if somebody's doing something genuinely unsafe and taking your line, that's one thing. But if somebody is just holding their line and going slower than you or taking the line that you don't want, don't call them out for it.
Chances are you're not the one racer out there who has it figured out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way to put it, Chad. If you like that video, you should subscribe to our channel. There's more where that came from. And even like the video down below with a thumbs up or leave us a comment.
If you want to see race analysis videos, click right over here. And if you want to get your coaching questions answered, click over here.
And if you want to become a faster cyclist, head over to TrainerRoad.com. It works. Trust us.
Just trust us.
We guarantee it.
Oh yeah, or your money back.
It's true. Take us up on it.